temple and happening outside of the Jerusalem temple. These country Jews from the lands around Jerusalem had come to the temple to purify themselves and get ready for the Passover. And what are they talking about? All of them. They're not just talking about the Passover. They're talking about Jesus. Now, this is at least 6 days before the Passover feast was celebrated. Everyone is talking about Jesus. And there is this spotlight that is going around Jerusalem. You can see it like in your mind in a movie. There's this spotlight that's going across Jerusalem, looking to see where someone would find and see the face of Jesus, if he would show up, if he would pop up. So the Jewish government is talking about Jesus. Let's go from top to bottom. The Jewish government is talking about Jesus. We went over that in the last of chapter 11, going through all of the different categories of the Jewish government that had met because they wanted to know what to do with Jesus. The chief priests are looking for Jesus. The high priest is looking for Jesus. The Pharisees are looking for Jesus. Everybody is looking for Jesus in the government. What did they command? This is the government officials. If you see Jesus, what? Let us know. So the high priest was talking about Jesus because he prophesied about Jesus dying. The residents of Jerusalem were talking about Jesus. The people who had come from the countryside and around Jerusalem, they're talking about Jesus on their way to Jerusalem. And they're asking the question, will Jesus come to the feast at all? The interesting thing is the way that question is phrased. They did not expect Jesus to show. And you know why they did not expect Jesus to show. Because everyone in Jerusalem knew what the higher-ups wanted to do when they got their hands on Jesus. Now, one of the main things that you know as a Jew when you hear about Jesus maybe coming to the Passover feast was what the high priest, Caiaphas, had already prophesied was going to happen if they got a hold of Jesus. This is the high priest, the highest religious authority in the entire land. And what did he say was going to happen to Jesus? He's going to die. These are the authorities who, if you see Jesus, you are supposed to tell them where he is so that they can arrest him. Anyone knows the whereabouts of Jesus, they should turn him in to the local authorities. The high priest made it very public. Jesus is going to die. Government officials made it very clear. If you see Jesus, you tell us. Not the first time this has happened. What did they say back in chapter 9? Whenever the blind man was healed, what did they tell the crowd that was there? If you believe that Jesus is the Christ, you will be what? You'll be cast out of the synagogue. Who do you think didn't know what the Jewish authorities thought about Jesus? Everyone knew. And it's into this scene that we once again go to Bethany. This is after Jesus has had his hiatus, going to Ephraim out of the spotlight. He's headed back. And the first place that John's gospel takes us when he heads back from Ephraim, from the edge of the wilderness, is that he goes back to Bethany. There is pressure everywhere concerning Jesus. Everyone is looking for Jesus. The population of Jerusalem has exploded, and everyone is looking for Jesus. And Bethany is 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. This is 6 days before the Passover. This is what Mary and Martha and Lazarus do in chapter 12. In this amazing circumstance and situation where we find Jesus in Bethany. He's right outside Jerusalem. He is at the home of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. And what do? They cook him supper. They make a dinner for Jesus. Now, they're Jews. And they know where Jesus is. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to tell the authorities where Jesus is. That is what the high priest, the chief priests, the Sanhedrin council, the Pharisees, the scribes, and anybody else you can think of has told the people, if you see Jesus, you tell us where he is. What did Mary and Martha and Lazarus not do? They didn't do. They were defying the orders of the Pharisees and chief priests in chapter 11, verse 57. They were harboring and even serving the very criminal that their government was seeking to arrest and kill. Just think about that in our terminology these days. They were harboring the very criminal and fugitive that the government was trying to arrest and eradicate. We would say in our language that they were harboring a terrorist. They were giving a meal to someone who the government saw as a threat to national security. You remember the discussion they had? Chapter 11. That we have to get rid of Jesus because if we don't, then the Romans are going to come in, they're going to take our position, and they're going to take our nation. They saw Jesus as a national threat. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus served him a meal. 2 miles from the capital city of Jerusalem. The faith of Mary and Martha and Lazarus is on full display. They were all followers of Jesus. They were servants of Jesus, and they did not care about the consequences. You can see that in this text. They did not care. Jesus came to their house. They were going to give him something to eat. They were going to fix him a meal. It didn't matter what was happening in Jerusalem. It didn't matter who rejected Jesus. They were following Jesus no matter what the authorities said. And Jesus was who they were always going to follow. Now, something very interesting happens at this meal. We might go over some of the other details. We didn't get too much. It kind of gives you the description of previous times that Jesus has been there. What's Martha doing? Of course, what's Martha doing? She's serving. That's what Martha does. She serves, you know. So Martha's serving. You got Lazarus who's just chilling. He's reclining at the table, you know. And then you got Mary. And Mary is all about worship and devotion. And Mary comes in that famous scene, with that pound of expensive ointment that was made of pure spikenard, and anoints the feet of Jesus and wipes the ointment with her hair. And the whole house is filled with the smell of this perfume. Okay, and I want to kind of backtrack on that, and I want to get down to what we just went over. We know that Mary and Martha and Lazarus are following Jesus, okay, and they're devoting themselves, no matter what the authorities say. Who has been brought up in the text as the character that you and I should look at? Judas. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they're following Jesus. Lazarus is only alive because of Jesus. You know he's going to follow Jesus. And I wanted to ask you this question, and you can say names if you want to. You can just tell me if somebody comes to your mind. I want you to tell me of someone in your life who has exemplified that the Lord was everything to them no matter what. When you look at Mary, Martha, and Lazarus and where they're living and the situation that they're in and how everyone in Jerusalem was looking for Jesus and how the authorities were looking for Jesus and how much in danger they really were in this situation to have Jesus in their home and serving him, there is no other conclusion you can come to but that Jesus meant all to them. They did not care what the rest of the world wanted to do with Jesus. They were going to follow him no matter what. So you tell me someone in your life who you can picture in that way. Like I said, you can say a name. You can just describe that person for me. I figured there would be silence, but I want to ask you this question. Do you see yourself as that example to somebody else? Because you should. Someone should see you that way. It's unmistakable when you look at this text that when you look at Mary and Martha and Lazarus, it's unmistakable for you to come to that conclusion that everything was about Jesus. So, remember, this is in Bethany, right outside Jerusalem, 2 miles. This is after Jesus disappeared from the spotlight, after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, maybe months later. This is after Jesus went to the wilderness with his disciples in the city of Ephraim. And this is what we're told in verse 4. Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, and John gives you this little parenthetical commentary, who was about to betray him. What did he say about Mary anointing Jesus' feet with this expensive perfume? What did he say? Why was this not sold for 300 denarii money given to the poor. Various, people have translated this into today's money. Could be anywhere from $17,000 to $19,000 in our money. In our money today. You have this precious ointment. Let's just say it's $17,000 worth of ointment. And you have Mary who is wiping this ointment off of the feet of Jesus with her hair. You tell me the mindset of Judas, when the first thing that he says is what? Not, behold how much he loved her, or she loved him. Not, oh, what a great example of someone who would praise and worship and sacrifice, whatever it was. Not anything like that. But the first thing out of Judas's mouth is what? It's a rebuke. Why was this not sold? And the money given to the poor. Now, John gives you the little commentary, the parenthetical statement, because who was John, by the way? John was an apostle. Who was eyewitness to all of these things that were happening? John, the apostle. So John says, and gives us the commentary, Judas did not care about the poor. How well do you have to know somebody to make that statement?
He cared about himself.
Yeah. But you think about John making that statement about Judas. How well do you have to know somebody to make that statement? About 3 years. And John says he did not care about the poor. But he only wanted that money so that what? So that when he put it in the money bag, he could use it for whatever he wanted to, because that's what he'd been doing. Judas is going to become the key to the rest of these stories in the next 2 chapters, okay? It's going to come to a pinnacle and come to a head in John chapter 13 when Jesus washes the disciples' feet, which is very interesting because what just happened with Mary? She just washed the feet of Jesus and Judas rebuked her for it. Guess whose feet Jesus is going to wash in John chapter 13? Judas. And when they have that meal together, and they ask, who is it that's going to betray me? Jesus dips that morsel of bread and says, to him who I give this morsel. And he gave it to Judas. And Judas went out into the night. And you know where he went? But all of this started on the way back from Ephraim. When Satan entered into Judas, at some point, we don't know when, the Bible doesn't say exactly. When Satan entered into Judas, and those thoughts became plans, which became activities.
Well, sometimes I wonder though, he said what he did about who he gave it to, and the other disciples didn't see what was going on when he gave it to Judas.
Oh, they were all worried it was them.
Huh?
They were all saying, is it I? Is it I? Is it I? But I don't know. I'm like you. Whenever Jesus gave the morsel to Judas and he went out, I wonder if everybody's like, that's weird. Is he pulling our chain? But you have the other end of that too, because what did John know about Judas that he just told you?
All about money.
Judas didn't care about the poor, he loved the money. So I don't really know what was in the mindset when it came to the apostles when it came to that. I won't even give you my opinion. That's not what I'm here.
You talked about the chief priest and the high priest being, they're supposed to be God-fearing men and stuff like that. Why was they wanting to, for Jesus to be turned in? It looked like they would want to be protected of him.
What are you talking about, Jesus?
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't believe he was the Messiah. They thought he was a false Messiah and deserved to die. So,
And
if,
there was a reason why, too.
well, they wanted to keep their station.
Plus, you just mentioned a while ago, the text doesn't bring it out here in John, but when you start looking at the scene and what was getting ready to happen, the 2 million people, that was the largest, biggest revenue draw for, not only for the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees, because they had to pay Rome all the taxes that were collected. And all that revenue that came in, that was their largest fundraising event, so to speak, that happened all year long. They got money, but they charged, I mean, even to go to the temple, you had to wash. To go wash, you had to pay. All of the people that came from all around the region, they had to pay to exchange for their,
Yep.
not being able to bring their offering.
Oh, they were skimming a lot.
There's a tremendous amount of money that the Pharisees made off of that event. Plus, that kept Rome off their back too, because they paid them a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
Because of that event.
And Josephus writes about, like, that they would bring a lamb out, and you would be sold that lamb. And that lamb would be led, and it looked like it was going to the altar, but they would take it around the temple. And they would come back, and the same lamb would be sold to the next person that was in line. So basically, they weren't out any lambs. They just sold the same lamb like 1,000 times. So you're talking about a bunch of money that was being revenued by the people who are higher ups, who sell the same lamb 1,000 times. That's a lot. So, but yeah, you're right. Everybody else heard that, right?